Hey there, writers and muse daters. I am super excited to be here today with Jill. She's had an amazing author journey and she has agreed to share some of her moments and momentous events with us. Thank you so much, Jill, for being willing to share with us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So, just to start off, for those who haven't met you yet, tell us what it is that you're writing.
I am writing a middle grade fiction story. It is the sequel to my first manuscript and the second in a trilogy about family that goes on vacation to the mountains of North Carolina.
That's great. And how did you come up with this idea?
It was inspired by real life events, inspired by my own family, my sons in particular, who enjoy fishing and are very competitive fishermen, and wanting to always catch that biggest fish. And the setting is based on a real setting that we've been to on vacation several times, and we're actually going back in a couple of months, which will be really fun. It's just very inspiring. Beautiful mountains, beautiful scenery. How could you not write a story? And when you and I first spoke, I had a very rough draft of the first book in the series, and you helped me bring that up to much higher standards. And now we're working on book 2. And it's really been fun. And actually, just yesterday, I asked you a question. You said, well, that sounds to me like book 3. And I was like, oh my goodness, even more work to do. But just so exciting. And I never would have thought 3 years ago that I would be writing a trilogy. And here we are.
This is amazing. And as you think about your journey to write this series, to follow this character, Josh, through growing up, what feels like one of the biggest victories, one of your biggest takeaways through this writing process so far?
Well, there have been many, but most recently, I would say something that came up earlier on, even with the first book, but it's really become to be more meaningful to me now, is the idea of a difference between a plot-driven story and a character-driven story. And both obviously have merit, both can be equally successful. But you saw in my little story about the boy who wanted to catch the biggest fish in the lake, you saw more. You just saw the potential for depth in my characters. And I wanted that. I wanted that depth and richness to the story. I had no idea how to get it there. I'm still trying to figure that out. But with your guidance, we've got there for book 1 and now for book 2. And the stories have become much more than just plot-driven events, plot-driven stories. They become character-driven stories where the character changes and evolves. They're coming of age stories where he's not the same kid at the end of the book that he was at the beginning of the book. And that it really means more to me now that I can actually see him growing up. In the first book, he was 10 years old. And now in this book, he's 11 years old. And I see the change in him as though he were a person that I knew. And so recently, very recently, you and I have had conversations about that. And I really see the difference between the two. And I'm learning what questions to ask and the work that has to be done to get from one to the other, if that is in fact your goal.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good insight. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you mentioned already you're in the process of writing book 2. You had already written the first book, of course. What felt like the biggest challenge going into book 2?
Well, I had a big question about, is there really something there, or is it just that I happen to like my characters? I like their little family. I love the place where they go, and I enjoy thinking about them and sort of spending time with them. And I actually had moved on to thinking about a completely unrelated story. And then I came back to you and I said, you know what? My brain keeps going back to my first story, my My brain keeps going back there, and I don't know if I'm done. I don't know if there's more of a story there to tell. And you said, well, take it out for a spin and see how it does, see what you can come up with. And so I did. And then since January, you and I have been working on revising and digging deeper in the scenes that I wrote for what happens the following summer when he goes back as an 11-year-old to the same place. How is he different? And how, more importantly, how is he different at the end of the story?
Yeah. Yeah. And in that process, I remember that, we were talking about the difference between the plot, the events that happen for the character, which as a writer, that's one of your strengths. You've got a lot of clarity on these are the events that are going to happen. And then digging deeper into that theme and the why. Talk a little bit about why that was challenging, the difference between the events and then the theme.
My brain kept wanting the events to be very logical and A to B and B to C and C to D. And that's fine. But if that's my focus, then I'm writing really a plot-driven story. And that was not my goal. And you knew that. So you kept asking me, but why? And you would phrase the question differently from week to week. But how does he act on that? What does he do? What object does he have that he has to take care of? What does it mean for him? And again, that's that same question. How is he a different kid going into 7th grade than he was when he came out of 6th grade? Something about him has to change. He has to grow up a little bit more. And I kept going back to, well, if they do this first, and then the next day they do that, and then they wake up the next day, but they can't do this, and then they do that. And you kept saying, but why? But I can hear your voice in my head. But why does it matter? Why does it matter? And you even said to me at one point, think of it this way. It almost doesn't matter what they do, right? It's why they do it. And why does he act a certain way? We want our readers to say, I get it. I get why he's struggling. I get why he's causing so much trouble. Because, and then I had to fill in that blank. And it was a pretty big blank. And it took 4 months of going around in circles and digging deeper to get to it. And then I think it was 2 weeks ago, we were talking and I had my notebook and I said, well, and put it into a sentence, what it was that answered that question of why. He's a different kid because fill in the blank. And I could actually put it in a sentence. And you said, wait a minute. You said, I think we're there. I think we're there. If you can articulate it in a sentence, then we're there. Then we say, okay, now how does that transfer to the page? How do we bring that into the scenes? Because he's not just going to sit there and think these thoughts. He has to sort of do the opposite of those thoughts and work his way through it. He's struggling with grief. And so he doesn't know that though, because he's 11. So the readers can sympathize and can see that he's struggling with grief. And that's what I really needed to show. Not that he's just some kid causing all kinds of trouble and being mean to his little brother, but there's a reason there. He's really grappling with these issues. And so as soon as I could put that into a sentence, and then we talked about what are some of the objects, the actual physical objects in his life that are important to him, that his little brother could kind of get involved with, and that he would want to protect. Then I had not only a theme, but I had a vehicle. I had an object for him to take care of, that of course things have to go wrong, and a way to do that. So now in all of those action-filled scenes that I wrote, I had to go back and recreate them so that the objects were in some way there with him, and that he was always going back to those objects and what they mean, and little brother stay away, and dealing with that grief. But now we know why, and
Yeah.
the readers know why. So it's a different story than it was before.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, what a celebration to be at that point. And I mean, this is a little awkward for me to ask because it's me. But you've mentioned several times, I can hear your voice in my head. How does it feel to have that level of support that you can hear your writing coach's voice in your mind?
It's great. It absolutely is great. You wouldn't have that anywhere else. The one-on-one approach and the knowing that I can come to you and not have an answer and have this whole mess of a story, and you're going to sit with it and you're going to spend time reading what I have, and you're going to see what's missing, not only in terms of the action. Well, they can't do this because they didn't do that first. But really what was missing was the theme and the why. And you knew that. You didn't know what the answer was. You didn't know why, but you knew that that's what I needed to do. And so it's not just a matter of critiquing a rough draft and providing feedback. It's really a matter of pushing and not giving up and staying with me until I got to that point, because there were times when I thought, I'm going to have this call with Annalise and she's going to say, you did your best. You really did a good job. It's just not there. It's just not happening. Let's just move on. But you never ever said that. You never ever said that, because you believed that if you supported me and kept leading me down this path, that I would get there, and you would rephrase the same question, that why question, in different ways from week to week. So from week to week in our calls, I would have work to do to kind of think it through and explore different ways to answer that question until I got to the bottom, until I got to that focal point, that sentence. And you're not going to get that in other places where your writing coach is really focusing on the manuscript and focusing on what you've got, and maybe polishing up what you've got. But to bring that level of depth and understanding and support to your work is just, it's above and beyond. And it's just a great feeling to know that that you have my back in many, many ways. That's one of them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And as you're talking about that, I'm thinking, there are so many writers out there who will go and join a critique group or use beta readers or one of those solutions. And in those situations, when they're soliciting feedback, that feedback might come back and be like, well, I don't think that Josh should be in a tube. I think he should be in a canoe. You should definitely not have him with his cousin. He should be with his brother. Why don't you have him wearing a purple shirt instead of a yellow shirt, right? It's this concrete kind of feedback that kind of comes out of left field a little bit. Over in the writing gym, as one of the things you mentioned is it's a guide, right? I didn't know the answer to Josh's why. I also didn't give you an answer for Josh's why. Well, maybe Josh does this. Well, why don't you have Josh, believe that, whatever? Like, it didn't sound like that. It was this gentle guiding through the use of questions. And if you compare that kind of like, put Josh in a canoe, why isn't he wearing a purple shirt type of feedback, to being guided through finding your own story, how do those feel different for you, Jill?
It's very different. I had that other kind of feedback with my first novel when I was in a writing group, and someone said, well, we don't know what color his hair is. Like, why don't we know what color his hair is? And I remember thinking to myself, really? Did I come all this way just for that? It's very different because it's much more personal, and it's much more, it brings your writing to another level. It's much more profound way of thinking. And it's the kind of questions and thinking that apply not only to this manuscript, but to anything else you might write in the future. The support and the knowing that there's more there, there's a good story here, there's a potential for a great story there. It helps with your confidence and your self-esteem, not just your skills. And it improves your writing so much. And to know that someone who's looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of stories, manuscripts, and all levels of completion, can read your story and say that we need, it's miss it, we, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to focus on. We need to focus on the why. Why does it matter? Coming from an expert, who knows what literary agents are looking for, who knows what publishers are looking for today, not what's been published 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe what middle grade novel they read when they were in 6th grade, but what's actually in the business today. It's just, you can't compare. You can't even come close.
Hmm. So if I'm hearing you right, I mean, there are two things there. One, it teaches you the lifelong skills that you need to be a novelist, but also takes into consideration what is happening right now in terms of not just craft, that's important. Let's have a good story, but also what's selling right now, what publishers and literary agents are looking for. Did I hear that right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's a huge part of it, because as a writer, you can get so bogged down with the muddle of the middle and all of the details, and it can be very disheartening, discouraging, and all of that. But to know that there's someone who's a professional in the business, not only with the writing piece, but with the publishing piece, who's saying to you, you have something, and there's a publisher out there who's looking for what you have. We just have to make it the best possible work we can. And then we're going to put it out there and see where it goes, see where it lands. The confidence that you have in your writers, and it comes from knowing what agents are looking for, what publishers are looking for, and what the options are in the world. Someone who can even say, maybe we'll start with a made for TV movie. Really? Where did that even come from? But who knows, like, that, and you are having conversations with those other people in the business. So you know what's being sought after, and you're getting your writers and their work up to par for that industry.
Yeah. I'm grinning because right before you and I started this celebration, I was on the phone with a literary agent on behalf of one of the members of the writing gym. And it was exactly that question. It was, okay, are we going to go with the manuscript first, or are we going to do the television pitch? Now, and this is where we get the up to the minute information from the publishing industry, because there's a writer's strike for television writers right now. We reconstructed the entire pitch. She helped me to position the query based on also having a television series with it eventually. I mean, it was just amazing. I can do a lot of this, but I mean, this is what she does every day to sell manuscripts. And so having that level of support for you guys, where I'm actually talking to the people who are selling your books for you, as you were talking, I was like, wow, that is a really amazing attribute of what happens here. And I guess I kind of take myself for granted in some ways, because it's just what I do for you guys, right? We have an issue, I get on a phone with a literary agent, I get on the phone with an acquisitions editor or whoever to kind of talk it through. But it does make that difference, doesn't it, to kind of have that leg up on your manuscript and to know that it's viable even as you're drafting it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You're not going to get that in a MFA program that's the same for all 50 students who enroll at the same time. You're not going to get that at the coffee shop when you meet with your writing group who cares more about, is it brown hair or is it blonde hair? You're just not going to get that. You might get some help with grammar and structure and things like that. But when you're really thinking about your goal of being published, to work with someone who knows what that means and knows what you have to do to get your manuscript there, it's priceless.
Yeah. Well, Jill, you are absolutely rocking it. I love watching your progress. I'm so excited for Josh. Book 3 coming up. I mean, you've just got so much amazing stuff going on for you. And wow, we really celebrate you. And thank you for your time in sharing your experience to really inspire others on their journeys as well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Really. Thank you for all that you do. It's you got a good thing here. Good program. People should call.
Thank you so much, Jill. And until next time, we will wish all of those listening and watching happy writing.